The Maverick groaned under the strain, her hull shivering as another barrage of blue energy lanced past her nose and exploded against the wall of rock to starboard. The asteroid field was a graveyard of jagged stone and iron, chunks of shattered moons locked in a slow, merciless dance. Damian Reed gritted his teeth, one hand steady on the throttle, the other flicking switches across a scarred control console that had seen better centuries. Warning klaxons wailed. The scanner pulsed in angry red as the patrol ships drew closer, their energy signatures prowling like wolves around the edges of his sight. "Come on, girl. Just one more miracle," he muttered, patting the cracked dashboard. The Maverick shuddered as though offended, but the engines roared in response. He dived hard, angling into a gap no sane pilot would have risked a canyon of tumbling rock with only meters of clearance on either side. The ship's shields flared as a splintering boulder scraped past, and Damian laughed, wild and breathless. The chase had always been his vice. 6 years of running contraband had made him quick, sharper than the patrol dogs who thought law could outfly desperation. Today, though, he'd miscalculated. The cargo stashed in his hold Terran whiskey, priceless in this quadrant, and neural stimulants that would buy him a year of luxury, had lit up the patrol's scanners like a beacon. They'd been on him since the outer rim, relentless, disciplined, and much too close for comfort. The cum crackled, a mechanical voice cutting through static. "Unregistered vessel, this is Galactic Enforcement. Cut your engines. Prepare to be boarded." Damian smirked at the empty cockpit. Not today. He yanked the yoke hard to port. The Maverick screamed in protest, its inertial dampeners straining, as he threaded her through a needle-thin passage between two massive rotating boulders. One of the patrol ships tried to follow and clipped its wing, spinning out into a spray of molten fragments. Damian whooped, heart hammering, but the thrill lasted only seconds. The second ship was still with him, and closing fast. Ahead, through the chaos of the asteroid belt, Nexus Station loomed. A gleaming citadel wrapped around the heart of a mined-out asteroid, its habitat rings glittering like jeweled halos. The wealth of a dozen worlds pulsed within those walls. Smugglers like him trading under the noses of the same patrols chasing him now. Damian scanned the docking arrays, jaw tightening. The main bays were swarming with patrol signature suicide. To approach, he needed another way in. He skimmed the schematics burned into memory from an old job, searching there. A maintenance lock on the upper residential ring, half forgotten, buried in the station's gilded shell. Off limits? Private. Perfect. He killed the Maverick's main engines and let momentum carrier into the shadows. The pursuing patrol screamed. Past, overshooting in the chaos. Damian switched to thrusters, fingers dancing with practiced precision as he eased the ship toward the Forbidden's airlock. The docking clamps clanged louder than gunfire in his ears. Breathing hard, he sat back, the silence in the cockpit heavier than the vacuum outside. He knew exactly what kind of section he'd just slipped into. The ring above Nexus wasn't for smugglers, traders, or even common citizens. It was for the powerful, the untouchable, the families who owned fleets and bought governments. If he was caught here, the patrols wouldn't bother with an arrest. They'd space him on the spot. Yet Damian felt the grin spreading across his face. Wrong turn or not, he was alive. For now. The Maverick's old bones had carried him through again, straight into the lion's den. He slung his pack over his shoulder, clipped his blaster to his belt, and keyed open the hatch. Beyond the airlock, shadows stretched in the dim light of an untouched maintenance corridor, whispering promises of secrets, danger, and maybe, just maybe, survival. Hell of a wrong turn, Damian murmured, stepping through, unaware that this mistake would rewrite the rest of his life. The maintenance corridor stretched like a vein through the station's underbelly, dim light panels flickering at uneven intervals. Damien's boots clanged softly on the grated floor, each sound magnified by the hush of recycled air. He moved quickly, shoulders hunched, his scanner in hand pulsing faint green to guide him. The Maverick was locked tight behind him, waiting. Like a loyal hound, but if the patrols traced his docking point, she'd be impounded or destroyed. He'd crossed a line by coming here. This wasn't smugglers' turf or traders' alleys. This was the beating heart of privilege, where the Astrian dominions most powerful made their homes above the rabble. His contact was supposed to be waiting somewhere inside Nexus, but the details had been vague. The plan had always been to dock in a neutral bay, keep low, and make the handoff without raising eyebrows. That plan was ash now. Damien's only chance was improvisation, something he had always excelled at. He climbed a narrow ladder, pried open a vent grill, and slid. Inside. The air was warmer here, tinged with the faint sweetness of perfumed filtration. Crawling forward, he saw light ahead and paused at another grate. When he peered through, the sight knocked the breath out of him. The chamber beyond was massive, its walls wrapped in silk banners, its floors a mosaic of gemstones that caught the glow from panoramic windows. Beyond those windows lay the asteroid belt, 1,000 spinning knives of rock lit by the reflection of distant stars. Rare sculptures, trophies from wars and conquests, stood in niches like silent sentinels. It was wealth made flesh, luxury, so far removed from the dust and grime of the outer colonies that Damien almost laughed, and it was empty that the gods had given him a chance. He slid the grate free and dropped lightly to the plush carpet, his boots sinking into fabric so soft it felt like mist. He scanned the room, spotted a cum terminal, and crossed quickly. A secure line that was all he needed. Get in, make contact, set the deal, and slip out before anyone noticed. But as his fingers reached for the panel, the lights shifted. The chamber brightened with a soft hum, no longer dim but dazzling, every corner revealed. Damien froze, hand hovering near his blaster. A voice cut the silence, melodic and sharp, like crystal shattering against steel. Don't even think about. It's human. He turned slowly. In the doorway stood a woman. No, not a woman, not exactly. Her skin shimmered violet, alive with subtle iridescence. 2 long tendrils, darker than midnight, spilled from her crown where human hair might have been, draping over bare shoulders half hidden by a gauzy night robe. Her eyes were deep blue, glimmering with equal parts curiosity and disdain. She moved into the chamber with a predator's grace, and Damien knew immediately he had stumbled into the worst kind of luck. This is awkward, he said, forcing a smile that had talked him past 100 customs officers. I think I might have taken a wrong turn. She tilted her head, studying him the way one might study an insect pinned beneath glass. Most wrong turns don't involve breaking into private quarters through the ventilation ducts. She hadn't called for security yet. That was something. Would you believe I'm an air quality inspector? The sound that escaped her lips was almost a laugh, though it carried an edge. You humans and your peculiar humor. She circled him slowly, her gaze sharp enough to flay. Damien resisted the urge to reach for his blaster. Firing it here would be suicide. Instead, he let her circle, let her see he wasn't intimidated, though his pulse hammered in his throat. Do you know whose quarters you've invaded? She asked at last. Judging by the decor, I'm guessing someone important. Nara Vex, she said simply. The name punched through him like a bullet. High Commander Vex's daughter. The Astrian. Dominion's ruling line. Hostile to humans. Legendary for ruthlessness. He had not just broken into a noble's chamber. He'd broken into the chamber of a woman whose father commanded fleets. Damien's smile faltered for the first time. I should probably be going. Her voice hardened to iron. Stay. I haven't decided what to do with you yet. His options narrowed in an instant. If he ran, he'd be dead. If he fought, he'd be dead faster. If he stayed, well, that was unknown territory. And Damian Reed had always been a gambler. He inclined his head, careful, measured. Then let's discuss my sentence over a drink. For the briefest moment, her lips curved into something dangerously close to a smile. That was when he realized. The wrong turn had only just begun. The room's silence carried its own weight, heavy enough to make Damian sweat beneath his jacket. Nara Vex didn't call for security, didn't shout, didn't move toward the cum panel. Instead, she glided across the chamber with a deliberate grace, plucking a crystal decanter from a cabinet. The liquid inside glowed with a faint luminescence, like bottled starlight. She poured 2 glasses without asking if he wanted one. Moonfire, she said, her tone casual, but her eyes fixed on him. A rare spirit from my homeworld. Most humans can't tolerate more than a sip. Damian raised his glass when she handed it to him, their fingers brushing. The contact sent a strange electric sensation humming up his arm, like static and warmth colliding. She felt it too. Her breath caught almost imperceptibly. He masked his surprise behind a smirk and downed half the glass in one swallow. Was fire wrapped in silk, sharp and intoxicating. He winced, then grinned. Strong, but I've had worse. You're reckless, she observed, lips curling faintly. Typical. Reckless, yes, but survival depended on keeping her intrigued. If she grew bored, he'd be in chains or worse. So he leaned into the banter, answering questions about Earth, culture, food, music. He skirted carefully around smuggling, presenting himself as nothing more than a wanderer with a fast ship. She listened with that predatory poise, correcting him whenever he strayed into Astrian politics or history. The moonfire loosened her demeanor, little by little. At first, her comments carried disdain, then curiosity. Finally, a glimmer of genuine amusement. When he quipped about humans not, in fact, eating the organs of their enemies for strength, she laughed, the sound delicate, musical. So your species doesn't conquer with appetite. How disappointing. Something shifted in the space between them. She moved closer, her tendrils rippling with color, her robe whispering against the floor. Her fingers hovered near his jaw, studying the rough texture of his skin as though he were a specimen under glass. Your physiology is coarse, she murmured, yet compelling. Damian caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, bold, reckless. Her sharp inhale told him he'd struck something deeper than curiosity. What followed unfolded with a hunger neither had quite intended. A collision of alien grace and human impulsiveness, instinct overriding thought. Damian didn't stop to ask questions about anatomy. In the heat of passion, he assumed consent was all that mattered. But when dawn's artificial glow filtered through the panoramic windows, and Nara stepped from her bathing chamber, her eyes were cold steel. You took liberties that were not offered. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. Damian sat, up in bed, confusion flooding him. What are you talking about? You seemed enthusiastic. Her tendrils rippled, angry scarlet bleeding into violet. Enthusiastic, yes, until you violated a sacred passage. The dorsal channel is not for indulgence. Her voice trembled with outrage, though her posture remained rigid. It is reserved for bonding ceremonies, for life partners, for the union of bloodlines. The words hit him harder than any blaster shot. In the haze of moonfire, in darkness, fumbling with unfamiliar anatomy, he'd stumbled into the unthinkable. To him it had been intimacy. To her it was sacrilege. Nara, I didn't know, he said quickly, palms raised. Human women don't, there's no way I could have. Insolent human. She snapped, her voice rising into a snarl that cracked against the chamber walls. In one fluid motion, she retrieved a ceremonial blade from its mount. The weapon hummed with energy as she pressed it against his throat. "You've entered the wrong orifice. One you've defiled." Damien froze, the edge singing against his skin. One twitch, and his story would end here in silken sheets. Then came the knock. A sharp triple tone echoing through the chamber, followed by a clipped, masculine voice over the cong. "Lady Vex, this is station security. Our scans detect an unauthorized human biosignature in your quarters. Please confirm your status." Nara's tendrils flared, shifting in frantic color. Damien saw her fury collide with calculation. To denounce him now meant disgrace for her as well as death for him. Slowly, reluctantly, she lowered the blade, though her eyes still burned with fury. "Now we lie," she whispered, voice trembling. With urgency. "Get dressed. Quickly. You're about to become something you're not." Damien scrambled for his clothes, pulling on his shirt and boots with practiced haste. "What's the plan?" he asked, half breathless. "You are my human consort," she said, voice steadying into aristocratic authority. "A diplomatic arrangement to foster better relations between our species." Damien blinked, stunned. "Will they buy that? I thought humans weren't even welcome here." "They aren't," she confirmed, slipping into a regal robe and smoothing her posture into poise. "But my father has spoken of outreach. It is plausible. More plausible than explaining what you've done." Her gaze cut into him like a knife. "Follow my lead. Say as little as possible." The door hissed open, revealing two Astrian guards in midnight uniforms, their hands resting on the grips of their sidearms. Their eyes locked on Damien with open suspicion. "Lady Vex," the lead officer said with a stiff bow. "Explain the human." Nara's voice was velvet steel. "He is my guest. Damien Reed, representative of the Earth Colonial Alliance. We are conducting cultural exchange." Damien forced his most diplomatic smile, bowing just low enough without appearing servile. "A pleasure, officers." The guards exchanged a glance, doubt simmering in their eyes. But Nara's name was iron here, her authority unquestionable. Moments stretched thin as a blade. Would the lie hold, or would this wrong turn end in blood? The grand reception hall of Nexus Station glimmered like a starfield caught in glass. Constellations shimmered across the domed ceiling, artificial but breathtaking, their shifting light casting silver and indigo hues over the crowd below. Hundreds of Astrian dignitaries mingled in ritualized arcs of conversation, voices a melodic hum, punctuated by the occasional burst of ceremonial laughter. Tables floated between clusters of guests, bearing crystal decanters and dishes of foods Damien couldn't name. Everything about the place screamed wealth, tradition, and a level of ceremony utterly alien to him. He tugged at the high collar of the borrowed attire Nara had pressed into his hands hours earlier. The robe fit well enough midnight blue trimmed with silver filigree, but the weight of expectation clung heavier than any fabric. He felt like an imposter in every sense, a smuggler disguised as a diplomat, walking on a knife's edge in a hall full of predators. "Stop fidgeting," Nara murmured, her lips set in a perfect diplomatic smile as she guided him forward. She wore a gown it seemed spun from living light, the soft luminescence of her skin mirrored in the threads. Her tendrils were adorned with delicate chains that chimed softly when she moved. Every step was poised elegance, a kind of confidence only someone born into power could command. Damien trailed beside her, trying to mirror her posture. He probably looked like a kid caught sneaking into a royal parade. "Easy for you to say," he muttered back, maintaining his own forced smile as a pair of nobles passed. "I'm usually the guy they're chasing away from the party. Tonight, you are the party," Nara said, her eyes glittering with a mix of warning and amusement. Remember what I told you. Bow at the proper angle. Do not comment on anyone's lineage, and, she lowered her voice, never accept food directly from another's hand. Damien swallowed, because that means. She didn't look at him, her expression flawless for the audience around them. A discussion of reproductive compatibility. He nearly choked on his drink. Right, got it. Avoid snacks. Nara's lips twitched almost imperceptibly, but she didn't break stride. She guided him toward the heart of the gathering, where more eyes turned their way. The whispers had already started. Damien could feel them, see the ripple through the crowd. Humans were not welcome in this sphere, yet here he was on the arm of High Commander Vex's daughter. Then a voice, sharp and smooth as polished stone, cut through the hum. Lady Vex. Damien stiffened. Approaching with deliberate steps was an Astrian older than most in the room, his tendrils bound with silver clasps that denoted authority. His expression was one of restrained disdain. Damien recognized him instantly from Nara's briefing. Minister Krell, father of the very officer who had scanned her quarters, and a notorious enemy of humanity. Minister, Nara replied smoothly, inclining her head in a bow of precise depth. May I introduce Damien Reed of the Earth Colonial Alliance? Damien mirrored the bow she drilled into him earlier, careful to angle it neither too shallow nor too deep. An honor, Minister. I've heard of your reputation. Krell's eyes narrowed. Indeed. And what exactly have you heard of me, human? Damien felt his pulse hammering, but he kept his voice level, his expression neutral. That you are a man of principle, devoted to the security of your people above all else. A commendable quality, even if others may disagree with your methods. Krell blinked once, as though taken aback by the audacity. Then his tendrils rippled in a subtle pattern. Damien was still learning to read skepticism, edged with irritation. You speak boldly for one whose kind has no standing here, Krell said. Perhaps too boldly. Before Damien could respond, another voice rumbled through the hall like distant thunder. Minister Krell. The conversations around them quieted as High Commander Vex strode into view. He was taller than most Astrians, his presence filling the space effortlessly. His skin was a darker shade of violet than his daughter's, his tendrils shorter, bound with ornate clasps that glittered with authority. The crowd bowed as one, even Krell lowering his head in stiff acknowledgement. High Commander, Krell said, his voice tight. I was acquainting myself with your daughters. Guessed. Vex's eyes, the same deep blue as Nara's but colder, fixed on Damien. So I see. His gaze lingered, weighing, assessing, before turning back to Krell. And your impression? My impression, Krell said, lips curling, is that this human is no diplomat. Station records confirm he docked through a maintenance lock, not an authorized port. That is the behavior of a trespasser, not an envoy. The words rippled through the room like a blade across silk. Damien felt the weight of 100 stares, suspicion tightening like a noose. Nara's hand found his arm. Her nails pressed lightly. A signal. She stepped forward, her voice carrying over the murmurs with perfect clarity. Minister Krell is correct, she said, to the shock of half the room. Damien did not enter through official channels. He entered through mine, because he is not only my diplomatic guest. Her head tendrils flushed in hues of violet and blue, the Astrian equivalent of a public confession. He is my bonded consort. The silence was absolute. A single dropped glass shattered against the floor, somewhere in the back. Gasps echoed from all sides. Krell's eyes widened, his face blanching a deeper shade of purple. The sacred bond, Nara continued, her voice unshaken, was completed between us last night. Damien's breath caught. He'd expected her to bluff, to argue, to stall. But this was playing her highest card, turning their forbidden mistake into public tradition. He caught her gaze, and in her eyes he saw not fear, not regret, but iron resolve. The hall erupted in whispers, scandalous, disbelieving, awed Dot, and just like that, the wrong orifice, the mistake that should have damned him, was now the one thing keeping him alive. The storm broke only after High Commander Vex raised his hand. One gesture, and the rippling tide of whispers died into a tense, humming silence. His presence was gravitational, drawing every gaze in the hall. He studied his daughter with a face carved from stone, then turned his eyes on Damien. The weight of that gaze was like a blade against his throat, measuring, cutting, considering. "Daughter," Vex said at last, his voice resonant enough to still the clinking glasses and hushed murmurs. "You claim a sacred bond with this human." Nara bowed her head slightly, every inch the perfect aristocrat, despite the enormity of her words. "It is true, Father. Last night, the ritual was completed. By ancient law, our bond is recognized." A susurration of scandal rippled through the nobles at the edges of the chamber. Damien caught fragments. Blasphemy. Impossible. A human? Krell's tendrils burned crimson with outrage. This is absurd. Krell snapped, no longer hiding his fury. The sacred channel has never been shared with offworlders. Never. High Commander, surely you will denounce this mockery. Vex turned his head slowly, regarding Krell with icy disdain. You dare question the sanctity of our oldest traditions? Krell faltered, his anger colliding with fear. No, High Commander. I mean only that. The precedent is dangerous. Dangerous? Vex's voice dropped to a quiet rumble, the kind of quiet that promised violence. Or inconvenient for your politics? The minister bowed his head, tendrils pressed tight against his skull. Forgive me. Vex let the silence stretch long enough to suffocate, then finally gestured to Nara and Damien. Come, both of you. The sea of nobles parted as the High Commander led them through the crowd. Their whispers followed, a current of speculation and fear. Damien forced himself to keep his posture steady, though his mind screamed that every step might be his last. Nara walked beside him, head high, her grip brushing against his sleeve like an anchor. They passed through an arched doorway into a private alcove lined with obsidian glass. From here, the asteroid field beyond the station glittered like a sea of fractured diamonds. The door sealed behind them with a hush, cutting off the murmur of the crowd. For a long moment, Vex said nothing. He simply looked at them, his gaze piercing, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. You've surprised me, daughter. Of all your rebellions, this exceeds them all. His voice was calm, too calm. And you, human Damien Reed, is it? Smuggler, outlaw, opportunist. Damien's chest tightened, but he kept his voice level. If you know what I am, why allow this farce to continue? A flicker of something, perhaps respect, perhaps amusement, crossed the commander's face. Because farce or not, you played the part well. My daughter risked everything to protect you. That intrigues me. He stepped closer, looming, his ceremonial blade glinting at his side. Tell me, Reed, do you understand what you've done? What the bond means? Damien hesitated, searching for the right words. I know it wasn't just intimacy. I know it's sacred. But I didn't understand until it was too late. Too late indeed, Vex said, circling him. Among our people, the dorsal bond entwines lineages. It is more than pleasure. It is union, eternal. By ancient law, you are now family to the house of Vex. Damien swallowed. Family. It sounded less like an honor and more like a shackle. Nara's tendrils shifted, violet bleeding into indigo. She spoke softly but firmly. Father, the bond was unplanned, but it is real. I will not deny it. Vex stopped before her, studying her face with the sharp intensity of a commander inspecting his troops. You have always been defiant, Nara, but this— His eyes flicked to Damien again. This could either ruin us or be our greatest advantage. Damien's instincts prickled. What do you mean? Vex clasped his hands behind his back, turning to gaze out the obsidian window. The Galactic Council pressures us to soften our stance toward humans. They demand cultural exchange, cooperation, empty gestures. But now— He looked back, eyes cold and calculating. Now my daughter has done what diplomats could not. She has bridged the divide in the most intimate way possible. You, smuggler, may be the key to silencing the Council's demands without binding us to formal treaties. You want me to be a liaison, Damien said slowly, piecing it together. Vex's lips curved in a shadow of a smile. Precisely. You are already bonded to the Dominion's bloodline. That makes you useful. Damien felt the trap snap shut. He was no longer just plain diplomat. He'd been drafted into a role that might define the fate of two species. He glanced at Nara. Her expression was guarded, but her eyes betrayed something— worry, defiance, maybe even a flicker of hope. And if I refuse? Damien asked, his voice steady though his gut tightened. Vex's hand drifted to the hilt of his ceremonial blade, resting there casually, almost lazily. But the threat was clear. Then your story ends tonight. No bond, no alliance, no daughter to shield you. The air between them crackled, heavy with unspoken choices. Damien met the High Commander's gaze, and for the first time, let his smuggler's grin slip back into place. Well, guess I better get good at diplomacy then. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Vex chuckled, low and dangerous. Bold. Perhaps even bold enough to survive what comes next. He turned away, signaling the conversation was over. Tonight, you will return to the hall as my daughter's consort. Tomorrow, we will discuss your duties. Damien exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of chains tightening even as his life was spared. Wrong turn, he thought grimly. The wrongest turn of all. But for the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, it was leading him somewhere he was meant to go. The air in the alcove still vibrated with High Commander Vex's authority when Damien and Nara emerged back into the reception hall. The storm of scandal had not died. If anything, it had grown sharper, whispers clustering into factions. Some nobles bowed stiffly, honoring the ancient law that protected bonded pairs. Others drew back with visible distaste, as if his very presence tainted the evening. Damien caught glances sharp enough to cut. Nara's grip on his arm was iron. Her posture radiated serene composure, but her tendrils betrayed her. Flashes of indigo anxiety laced with violet defiance. Keep your head high, she murmured through her smile. They feed on weakness. Easy for you to say, Damien muttered back, lips fixed in what he hoped looked like a diplomatic grin. I feel like a goat in a wolf den. You are, she replied softly, though a faint curve of amusement touched her mouth. But you are my goat, and that matters. Before Damien could respond, a ripple in the crowd warned him of trouble. Minister Krell was moving toward them, trailed by several attendants. His eyes were twin shards of ice, his tendrils burning a deep, furious red. The man had not accepted Vex's dismissal earlier. His anger had only festered. Lady Vex, Krell said with brittle formality, bowing just enough to remain technically respectful. Your announcement has caused quite the stir. Minister, Nara replied evenly, I am sure you understand the sanctity of tradition. The bond cannot be denied. Tradition? Krell's voice sharpened. Tradition binds Astrians, not humans. This, he gestured toward Damien with a flick of disdain. This interloper cannot be legitimized by invoking ancient rites he does not even comprehend. Damien met his gaze steadily, refusing to flinch. Understanding comes with experience, Minister. That's why cultural exchange exists, isn't it? Krell's lips curled into something between a sneer and a smile. You speak as though you belong, but records do not lie. You crept aboard this station like a thief, through a maintenance lock. No envoy would stoop to such methods. The murmur around them thickened. Damien felt the noose tightening again. He opened his mouth to answer, but Nara's hand squeezed his arm, warning. She stepped forward, her voice carrying like a blade drawn in public. Yes, she said clearly. He entered through my lock. Because he is not a thief, Minister. He is my consort, and I permitted it. Gasps rippled through the chamber. To claim ownership of the scandal, to wield it openly, was audacious even by Astrian standards. Krell's eyes widened, then narrowed. You would risk the dominions. Stability for a human. His voice rose, trembling with indignation. No, you risk it for yourself, for your indulgence. This is not diplomacy, it is desecration. Damien felt heat rising in his chest. He stepped forward before Nara could stop him. Careful, Minister. If you accuse her of desecration, you accuse your High Commander of weakness. He's already accepted the bond. The words hung like a live charge. Around them, nobles shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to hear defiance against Vex, even as scandal tempted them. Krell's face flushed darker purple. You insolent. Enough, a new voice cut in. Officer. Krell, the minister's son, pushed through the crowd. His expression was grim, his uniform immaculate. He held a datapad in his hands, its surface glowing with station records. Father, you must see this. Damien's gut clenched. The younger Krell projected the records into the air. A holographic display spun above them. Docking logs, biometric, traces, evidence that Damien had bypassed all official channels. Proof undeniable that he was no envoy but a trespasser. There, Minister Krell said triumphantly, his voice carrying. Fraud exposed. The sacred bond cannot shield a criminal from justice. High Commander Vex may tolerate this farce, but I will not. Guards. The word cracked like a whip, and Astrian security officers moved forward, their hands already on. Their weapons. The crowd erupted into layered chaos, some shouting for restraint, others demanding blood. Nara moved instantly, placing herself between Damien and the advancing guards. Her tendrils blazed violet fire. Touch him, she hissed. Her voice low but lethal. And you dishonor me. You dishonor my father's word. The guards hesitated, caught between tradition, authority, and the minister's order. The hall teetered on the edge of violence. Damien felt it, then her hand sliding into his. The same electric current from before surged through him, stronger now, defiant. He looked at her and found not fear but determination. She wasn't bluffing. She would fight for him, against her own people if she had to. The moment stretched, fragile as glass. Then High Commander Vex's voice thundered from the back of the hall. Enough! Every head turned. The commander advanced, his expression carved from fury and control. His gaze swept the chamber, silencing nobles, freezing guards in place. The bond stands. The human stands. And anyone who disputes this disputes me. For the second time that night, the High Commander saved Damien's life. But as Vex's eyes settled on him, cold and sharp as drawn steel, Damien realized the rescue came with a price, because Vex wasn't saving him. Vex was claiming him. The chamber's tension could have shattered steel. Guards froze mid-step, nobles hushed to silence, and the only sound was the steady hum of the station's environmental systems. High Commander Vex stood at the center of it all, a living fulcrum of power, his tendrils bound tight against his skull. His eyes burned cold fire as he regarded the hall, then fixed upon Damien with merciless intensity. The bond stands. Vex repeated, voice resonant, implacable. By our most ancient laws, it cannot be denied. Would you discard the traditions of our ancestors so easily, Minister Krell? The minister trembled with fury, but bowed his head, trapped. No, High Commander, but no. Vex's voice cut through the air like a blade. You have had your say. He gestured sharply, and the guards melted back into the crowd, though their suspicion lingered in their eyes. Damien exhaled slowly, though the relief felt like standing on a scaffold after the noose had already been placed around his neck. Vex turned away from the assembly. Daughter, human, walk with me. The nobles parted again, their whispers trailing like smoke in their wake. Damien and Nara followed Vex into a private council chamber adjoining the hall, its walls lined with star maps etched into crystal panels. The door sealed behind them, cutting off the murmur of the crowd. For a long moment, Vex said nothing. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring out the viewport at the endless ballet of the asteroid field. Finally, he spoke. You have forced my hand, Nara. His tone carried no anger, only cold certainty. But perhaps the timing is fortuitous. Nara inclined her head. Father, I know what I've done, but the bond cannot be undone. Damien. And you misunderstand, Vex said, turning at last. His gaze bore into Damien, stripping away every pretense, every mask. The question is not what you have done. It is whether he understands what he has become. Damien swallowed, forcing himself to meet that stare. I know it wasn't just intimacy. I know it's sacred. But beyond that no, I don't understand. Vex's lips curled into something that might have been a smile, if not for the edge of cruelty in it. Then allow me to enlighten you. He stepped closer, his voice lowering, resonant with the weight of tradition. The dorsal channel is not merely physical. It is where our essence resides, the ancestral thread that binds Astrians to those who came before. When you entered, human, you did more than trespass. You entwined your essence with my daughters. Your blood, your line, your genetic echo has joined with ours. By the oldest of laws, you are now Vex. Damien froze, the words slamming into him harder than any chase or firefight ever had. You're saying? I am saying, Vex continued, that your mistake has rewritten lineage. Any children born of Nara will carry human essence. Even if none are conceived, the bond itself ensures that your kind is now grafted into our ancestral web. You are no longer just a smuggler. You are, by law and tradition, kin to me. Nara's breath caught, her tendrils rippling in shades of shock. Father, you can't mean. I mean exactly that, Vex said, his voice hardening. This union, unintended as it may be, cannot be reversed. The Astrian Dominion will not expel him now. To do so would be to sever its own roots. He must be protected, elevated, claimed. Damien staggered back a half step, the enormity of it crashing down on him. In a single night, he'd gone from fugitive smuggler to bonded consort to royalty. The thought was absurd, terrifying, intoxicating all at once. You see, human, Vex said, drawing closer until Damien could feel the weight of his presence. Your mistake has tied your fate to ours. You may think yourself clever, reckless, lucky, but now you are part of the Dominion's future, and I will see to it that you serve that future or die protecting it. Silence fell heavy in the chamber. Damien's throat was dry, but his voice emerged steady, edged with his trademark grin. Guess I've always been good at finding trouble. Just didn't think I'd marry into it. Nara shot him a look half exasperation, half admiration. Her tendrils flushed a shade closer to violet warmth. Vex's gaze remained unyielding, though a flicker of grudging respect crossed his features. Perhaps you are not entirely unworthy. But know this, If you ever bring harm to my daughter, or dishonor to this bond, no ancient law will shield you. Do you understand?" Damien met his eyes. "Crystal clear, Commander." Vex straightened. "Good. Then prepare yourselves. By tomorrow, the Council will know of this union. You will both stand before them, not as smuggler and noble, not as scandal and shame, but as bonded consorts, as bridge between species, as the future." He turned back toward the viewport, the audience dismissed. Damien glanced at Nara, who was watching him with a strange intensity. He couldn't read all of it: anger, confusion, fear, but there was something else beneath it, something softer, something dangerously close to trust. And as the stars wheeled silently beyond the glass, Damien realized the wrong turn that should have ended him had instead bound him to a destiny larger than anything he'd ever imagined. For the first time in his life, Damien Reed wasn't just running from the law. He was rewriting it,